This new adventure begins with Lieutenant Catalina trying to save Lyria, a young woman with great power who was imprisoned in the floating fortress of an emperor who seeks to do experiments on her. However, just as the guy tries to stop them, something inside Lyria explodes and sends her into a free fall from the sky. Minutes before, our protagonist Graham was cutting wood with his friend Aaron when suddenly they observe the Emperor's battleship flying very close to the ground of the island, and immediately afterwards the flash occurs that shoots Lyria when she is ejected by the explosion. So, without hesitation, she heads to the forest to find out what it is. But he doesn't do it alone since he is accompanied by Bairn, a kind of pet dragon. After a long time searching, he finds Peleazul lying very close to the sanctuary, which they supposedly cannot approach, but the protagonist doesn't give a shit, and in this way they meet Lyria, who apparently was not taught that you should not talk to strangers, since the girl, very innocent, begins to tell them everything that happened to her, and asks them if they saw Catalina by chance. Grant, who luckily is not a kidnapper, lets her know that he has no idea who this woman is. Then, Lyria describes her as a beautiful and strong woman. Even though this information is of no use, the protagonist offers to look for it, but suddenly, they are intercepted by two soldiers from the fortress, who don't do a damn, since our boy uses his great fighting skills to eliminate them in seconds. But, obviously, he couldn't do everything so easily, and that's why one of the enemies takes advantage of his last strength to call for reinforcements with a flare. Knowing that night is coming, the three begin to escape towards the town. Therefore, Gran takes the opportunity to ask Lyria who the hell the guys are looking for her, and is stunned to learn that it is the Erste Empire. In the midst of so much chatter, the idiots do not realize that they are being surrounded by enemies, but just at that moment they are helped by Catalina, who opens the way so that they can continue advancing. Once they have gone far enough, the swordswoman, as a thank you, introduces herself to Graham and Bairn as Catalina Alice, from the Erste Empire, which confuses the protagonist quite a bit, since the guys who are trying to kill them are from the same side. But he doesn't think too much about the issue, and without hesitation he offers to give them a hand so they can escape from the island. Several meters further on, they encounter Captain Palmer's crew, who, laughing, summons a five-headed hydra, which seriously injures Graham. Lyria, seeing how Bing mourns the death of her best friend, revives him using her powers. But that's not all, since now they both share energy, and this allows them to summon Bahamut, a dark dragon that, honestly, I would not like to have against. Palmer, all desperate, orders the Hydra to attack with all its power. But next to Bahamut, it is nothing more than an annoying mosquito, which causes the dark dragon to exterminate it with just one attack. Once the enemies have retreated, Lyria keeps Bahamut in her amulet, and Gran faints due to the tremendous waste of energy, which leads him to dream of that letter from his father, in which he said that he was waiting for him in Stelucia, the island of the Astrals. Words that, despite being only a child, motivated him to want to take to the skies to live the same adventures as his father. Many hours later, the protagonist wakes up quite confused, asking what has happened to the soldiers. So, after Byrne and Lyria have welcomed him happily, Catalina is the one who informs him that, for now, he should not worry about the Empire. But in a very serious tone, she asks him to sit down to talk about his return to life. Although, before continuing, the swordswoman says that Lyria was imprisoned because she has immense power that allows her to control primal beasts, and they were lucky that the dark dragon was just wintering on the island. Byrne, quite surprised, asked if the blue fight is part of the astral legends, which Catalina denies, saying that there are no records that these beings have left descendants, in addition to the fact that Lyria does not remember anything about her life before being captured by the Empire. Once put in context, both move on to what is important and confess to the protagonist that, having been revived with the girl's powers, he now cannot be separated from her, because they share the same life force. Therefore, Catalina has no other options than to ask Graham to travel aimlessly with them, since for the moment, it is the only way they have to avoid being captured. As night falls, the town prepares a huge banquet to welcome the new girls. Then, Catalina takes the opportunity to apologize, saying that because of them, the Empire attacked the island, but the people refuse to accept them since they perfectly understand that they were only escaping from those who wanted to capture them. Despite the good reception, Catalina informs them that tomorrow they will continue on their way, and that is when the protagonist gives the news that he will go with them, which actually excites him very much, since if we go back a few hours to when they were talking, Gran is very excited and thanks them for adding him to the adventure, because he really wants to meet his father in Stelucia. Back in the present, Aaron gets angry at our boy because he thinks he's about to do something stupid, but both his father and the townspeople tell him to calm down, since they know well that it's something Graham has wanted to do for years. The next morning, the group prepares to leave for the adventure. Although apparently their sleeplessness works against them a bit, because when they try to take off, Catalina almost crashes the aircraft into the mountain. But nothing more than a scare happens, and once in the air, they are shocked to see how beautiful the sky is. However, the enjoyment doesn't last long either, since after a few kilometers, they end up making a forced landing in the middle of nowhere that completely destroys the plane. Suddenly, a guy who saw everything that happened approaches them asking several technical questions about the aircraft, but upon noticing that they don't understand a damn thing, he leaves angrily saying that, in order not to ruin such precious machines, they should educate themselves first. With no other options, the group walks to Eora, the main city of the island in Ghana, which is the one they have just landed in, and once inside, they realize that it is a transit point that opposes the Empire's mandate. Therefore, Catalina informs that they are going to continue their trip on a passenger aircraft, but first she suggests that they take the opportunity to buy everything they need. The next morning, the group heads to the terminal to buy tickets, but find that they are sold out. While she tries to figure it out, Grant, Lyria, and Bairn are shocked by how huge the ships are, so the guy who saw them crash yesterday approaches them to give them flying tips. Bairn, faced with the situation, asks them questions about their adventures in heaven, but the man stops him to ask him to stop calling him old and introduces himself as Raken. Then, he takes them to his workshop to show them that he has been able to repair the engine of the plane they crashed. However, he tells them that the condition for his return is that they find a suitable pilot. Suddenly, Trang and Stun, two strange guys, approach to offer them a free aircraft, which obviously seems very suspicious to our boys. And thank goodness, because among so many words, the blue-haired guy escapes saying that he knows Lieutenant Catalina. Raken, realizing what is happening, uses the smoke from the engine to help the group escape, but this does not help much, since after running for a while, the idiots end up cornering themselves. Graham, with no other options, tries to fight the enemies, but suddenly a mysterious woman causes a collapse to avoid the confrontation, and Raken appears from a secret underground passage saying that they are quite reckless. In this way, the boys manage to return to the terminal where they meet Catalina, and they go to a tavern to tell her everything that has happened. Ciero, the elf who owns the place, after listening to their problems, offers to sell them an aircraft. But since the group does not have enough money, she suggests they find a pilot. The men at the next table, upon hearing this, comment that there is a very good one called Raycon. However, they warn that it will be very difficult to convince him because he is obsessed with repairing an old ship. Knowing this, our boys head to the outskirts of the city with the intention of asking him to travel with them, but upon arriving, they run into the army of General Furious, who, as soon as he recognizes them, gives the order to capture them by any means possible. As things get out of control, Raycon observes how the Empire is using fire near his project, which causes the crazy guy to start firing shots and an impact on the Fury chair, causing the asshole general to fall on his back. In this way, in addition to making fools of the enemies, Raken uses the bullets to show the protagonists that they are near a hatch that lowers the secret passages, which allows the group to meet with Raken, who informs them that they can stay in his hideout until the problems calm down. Once comfortable, Gran tells the guy that they were looking for him to ask him to help them as a pilot, but he immediately refuses, since the only way for him to fly again is in the Great Cipher, the aircraft he is fixing, which is a pretty big problem, because that junkyard has been abandoned since Raycon was a child. And as if that weren't enough, the guy comments that apparently the machine is angry with him, since even though he has repaired everything that was damaged, he still can't make it fly. Knowing this, Catalina suggests that they then return to the city to try to save the citizens, because when they were before General Furious, the idiot mentioned something about destroying the island. However, on the entrance bridge, they meet two dark-haired guys, who, suspiciously, insist on giving them a ship to escape. But when our boys refuse, Dram and Stern become quite violent, which causes the group to have no other options than to fight. Although the issue does not last long, since a few seconds later, a tornado begins to devastate the island, and that is when Dramp comments that, apparently, General Furies has started to have fun. Therefore, the Empire's spies leave prioritizing their lives. Once alone, Lyria comments that she has a strange feeling, as if something stronger than before was behind the clouds. Upon arriving in the city, they find that almost everyone is taking refuge in a temple, but when they look out the windows, they notice several tornadoes destroying the island. Therefore, Raycon puts aside his whim to fly over the Great Cipher and offers to pilot to take out as many as possible. However, when they arrive at the dock, General Furies from his battleship destroys the only functional ship that remained, and later confesses that he has been bothering Tiamat a little, the primal beast that they consider the goddess of the wind. Lyria, faced with the situation, asks if there isn't a small ship to approach the goddess, since she, with her power, could calm her down. Then, Reincarnated, as a last option, takes us to the Great Cipher, trusting that it will be able to fly, and thus, as if the machine understood that it is a life-or-death situation, it begins to fly after many years being able to put our children in the sky. But not everything is that easy, since Tiamat, sensing them close, begins to attack them because Furies has used a device to increase her level of anger. Raycon, faced with the situation, increases the speed of the ship using his skills as an experienced pilot, but here, alone between us, the guy simply turns it off so that gravity does its thing. In this way, the group manages to avoid being shot down by Tiamat's shots, but without realizing it, they end up entering the clouds that house the goddess. Lyria, for her part, uses the ability to ask Tiamat to stop destroying the island, which obviously does not work, since the woman, without saying a word, begins to attack them. But this is not because the goddess is a hysteric who does not feel like stopping, but rather it is because those of the Empire implanted a device in her that blocks communication with Lydia's ability. Therefore, Gran asks Rakan to put them right on top of Tiamat, and once that is done, Lydia introduces the protagonist to the power of Bahamut. With all that power, our boy jumps into the void to free the goddess from the artifact that controls her emotions. Then, with her consciousness restored, she takes the trouble to carry Graham to the ship. Rakan, upon having her in front of him, apologizes on behalf of his people for having left her forgotten, and even promises to make everyone understand that without her, the island cannot remain alive. So Tiamat, in addition to stopping the tornadoes, gives Lyria a powerful stone as a thank you for saving her. On the way back to Tierra Firme, the group heads to Cairo's tavern to eat something, but I find it necessary to go back a few minutes in time to see how Catalina, while healing the protagonist's wounds, scolds him for having been so reckless, and with the excuse that her tutor asks her to consult him next time before doing something like that. But for me, it's because the girl is having other kinds of feelings. Back in the present, Lyria shows Gran that the stone Diama gave her shows a flaming volcano, so Ciero, in the mood as always, asks them how the hell they got a piece of a map of the sky. Catalina, noticing that they do not know what she is talking about, tells that, according to legends, the map of the sky is a legacy of the Astrals, and by gathering all the pieces, it will allow them to cross the shadowy basin that divides the two kingdoms. Lyria, quite surprised, describes in detail what the stone shows them. Ciero then comments that it could be a site on Dremel Island in the Duchy of Valtz. At night, Grant meets with Raka to tell him that his goal is to reach Lucia, the island of the Astrals, and asks him to be the pilot of the group, which the guy immediately accepts because he has finally fulfilled his goal of flying the Great Cipher. The next morning, our boys are preparing to leave for the adventure, when, suddenly, Kiro stops them to ask them to please meet with a client for nothing. Therefore, Catalina and Lirio leave the final decision to Graham, since, now that he has obtained transportation, he is considered the leader of the group. The protagonist, upon hearing this, tries to oppose it, but Byrne is motivated to follow his father's legacy. So, our boy orders to travel directly to Valse. While all this is happening, Drang and Strum meet with their captain, a guy in armor who seems to be quite important in the story, but we'll find out later. Many hours of travel later, the group arrives without problems at Valse, where the girls are surprised by how immense the volcano that the island has inside is. Suddenly, Cairo approaches them saying that apparently they are already magmatized. But the strangest thing about all this is that somehow the merchant arrived faster than the group and left much later. Leaving that aside, the woman hands them a paper with a job for them, although she refuses to give them the details, as she prefers to do it in a more private place, which makes me think that something very, very shady is coming. At night, our boys meet with Cairo and a guy who works for Val's intelligence, who asks them to please help him with a job for the state. This greatly surprises the group, and it is Catalina who realizes what is happening. So, without mincing words, she asks him who the hell they should look for. Then, the guy, after asking them to keep everything a secret, confesses that he is Archduke Sokka, one of the most important people in the country. Despite being an extremely dangerous mission, the protagonist as captain decides to accept it. For this reason, first thing in the morning, our boys spread out throughout the city in search of information. In this way, at the end of the day, they manage to discover that the Archduke is a person very loved by the people of the island. But rumors also say that the guy was collecting dangerous materials to create a weapon capable of destroying the world. Obviously, that links him to the Empire, since several people claim to have seen him using their ships. The next day, the group decides that it is best to continue the search together, but what they don't know is that they are being followed by a girl who can become invisible, something to which the girl is of little use, since Catalina instantly realizes that they have someone behind them. Then, Raken comments that, actually, this is happening since yesterday. Suddenly, they hear a person asking for help, and as they approach, they realize that the girl who was following them is being harassed by goblins. So, after being saved, she asks, "Please, to be updated with the Archduke's information, since the man is her magic teacher." Later, everyone heads to the tavern, where she introduces herself as Il and tells them that Tasca, in addition to being a great wizard, is an excellent inventor. But unfortunately, he has started acting very strange since those from the Empire arrived, to the point that he left without telling anyone. Our boys, quite moved, try to calm her down by saying that they are going to find him, but Io, quite determined, comments that, in reality, she is going to join the search team. Thanks to this, the group gets information about the places Sokka frequented and ends up visiting a quarry that can only be reached with a key. After taking a look from the entrance, Raken comments that it seems they haven't had any luck. But suddenly, Io manages to perceive her master's magic, and in this way discovers a secret passage that takes them to a kind of giant laboratory, where Lyria, somewhat fearful, confesses to having strange sensations. At that moment, Drawn and Storm appear, saying that this happens because before the place belonged to the Astrals, therefore it is likely that he is sensing primal. Ruckin, quite angry, asks if they are going to continue what they started in Port Brise, to which Dran, laughing, answers that obviously not, and comments that they are only there, accompanying their boss. As soon as he finishes his word about being held in imposing armor, he steps forward to introduce himself, which causes Catherine, very scared, to ask what the hell the Supreme Advisor of the Erste Empire, one of the 7 Luminary Knights, the very famous Black Knight, is doing there. Io, for her part, checks where the hell Sokka is hiding. Then, Dran says that apparently they are confused, and says that the Archduke has requested funding from the Empire to create a weapon that involves Lyria, but has escaped with the results. Having said this, the counselor, we suppose, leaves with his people, and that is when a mechanized machine appears with the intention of eliminating our boys. Ilo, upon noticing that this thing works with his master's magic, tries to ask him where it is hidden, but obviously does not receive any answer, and it is the protagonist who prevents the girl from being hit. Raken, for his part, uses a rifle to buy some time, which allows our boys to run to a safe area where he begins to cry, thinking that he may never see his master again. Lyria, knowing how ugly sadness is, motivates the young girl by saying that her words surely reach Sokka, therefore she should not lose hope and trust that they will soon find him. With the crying problem solved, Raken suggests looking for a way out, but Catalina comments that in reality they must first find something that confirms that the Archduke is in that place. Lyria then confesses that ever since the mechanized monster appeared, a voice has been calling her. Knowing this, the group begins to descend several floors through an unreliable staircase, but since that apparently gives them shit, they take advantage of the time to ask Io what her relationship with the Archduke was like. Then, she tells them that their teacher is a kind of big boy, since every time he became obsessed with a machine or magical research, he even forgot to eat. A few minutes later, the group arrives at a rather strange place that seems straight out of the Middle Ages, where they find a giant suit of armor and a Sokka, who, quite angry, asks them what the hell they are doing in their lair. Io, for her part, tries to ask him to return home, but the Archduke, showing a completely strange attitude, comments that he will never give him what he is building for the people of Balls, and even treats them as if they were enemies. The protagonist, quite surprised, also tries to convince him with words. However, Sokka, with clear symptoms of being possessed by something, ignores it to say that right now Lyria's power would be very useful for him to complete his project. While all this is happening, the Black Knight orders his puppet to give Sokka a chance to demonstrate what he has built. Therefore, the girl uses her powers to bring the giant armor to life. But before continuing, an informative pause so that you know that the puppet is a young woman who seems to have powers very similar to those of Lyria, but is a kind of slave to the Black Knight. Returning to the story, the group has no other options than to try to fight, but our protagonist, noticing that it does him no harm, asks Lyria to inject him with the power of Bahamut, which only serves to make him the star, since the idiot is almost cut in half and ends up hanging from a chain. Sokka, laughing, addresses the armor as Colossus to order it to kill everyone, so the machinery ends up being knocked down. So, thanks to Lyria, it has enhanced its spells. In the same way, the blue fight increases the statistics of all its companions, and, thanks to this, the 5 work together so that the little girl is the one who delivers the final blow to Colossus. Then, her teacher approaches her to slap her a couple of times, asking what the hell is happening to her, which causes Sokka, now conscious, to start crying and apologize for making her feel bad. Suddenly, the place begins to shake to the point that a piece of the ceiling begins to fall on Sokka. But before knowing how things end, Io tells us that 3 years ago she lost her parents due to an illness, and it was the Archduke who took care of her. Again, in the present, the little girl continues telling her story, only now Sokka is safe in her bed. Therefore, we are going to assume that Colossus, in some way, recovered energy to prevent the man from being crushed by the piece of ceiling. Lyria, for her part, begins to cry because she also lost her parents when she was just a child, and right now Catalina is all she has, so the mere thought that something could happen to her destroys her. Io, seeing her friend sad, uses a magic trick to make her smile, but she can't stop thinking about why her teacher did what he did. Then, from bed, he confesses that, after seeing that no one in Bolse kept smiling, he wanted to create some kind of power to protect people from suffering. He then continues that he received a visit from a person who gave him something called the Source of Power, but when trying to continue with the story, he comments that he has confusing memories, and that is why he only dissolved due to the inconvenience caused by the creation of Colossus. At that moment, Lyria informs him that, apparently, the machine understood its true purpose all along, since, after saving him, as I said, she received his thoughts through a piece of the sky map, and thus was able to discover that Colossus knew what his duty was. After having solved the problem, Gran together with Lyria use the new fragment to discover the next destination, being the famous islands of the August Sea. The next day, Sokka approaches the group's ship to say goodbye to them when, suddenly, Io, very cheeky, appears with her luggage saying that she is going to go with them, which Rackham is a little upset about since no one invited her, but in the same way, he ends up accepting her as a new companion. In another part of the world, Mary and Carvin, two somewhat peculiar adventurers, are investigating some ruins, when suddenly the redhead begins to ask for help because she has stumbled upon a trap. But her friend, all stupid instead of giving her a hand, comments that traps do not wait for people and stares at how the other idiot fights for her life. So Mary, once she has been saved by very little, complains about that stupid attitude she had, and even he reminds him that his role on the team is to detect traps, but so far all he has done is activate them. Carva, through no fault of her own, does nothing but point at the wall, which makes Mary even angrier. However, it turns out that now the redhead was doing her job, and a few seconds later both are forced to escape from a giant stone. As night falls, we can see how the group has had to stop on an island that was on the way to August. Therefore, they take the opportunity to meet with Cairo, who, as a thank you for the previous work, offered to give them supplies for the trip. But since the woman is a merchant, clearly it's not going to be completely free for them. Then, while they waited a couple of days for her to gather all the supplies, she suggests they go visit some new ruins that have been discovered on the island, and even shows that she had a map prepared for them. Taking this into account, it is evident that our boys landed on the same island where the idiot adventurers are, and furthermore, we can confirm that Sierra is one. With no other options, at first hour in the morning, the group heads to the ruins, where as soon as they set foot near the entrance, they activate a trap that makes them fall into deep tunnels, and as if that were not already a disaster, it also separates them into two groups. Faced with such a disaster, our boys try to take advantage of the vital connection between Lyria and the protagonist to find each other, but everything gets complicated with every step they take, because there are traps everywhere. Bairn, who has arranged to meet Catalina and the Blue fight, comments that Graham's sense of direction is rubbish, therefore if the issue depends 50% on him, they may never meet. Despite such a burn, the little dragon also confesses that the protagonist is like his brother, which is why he knows well that he is going to do his best to find them and to fulfill the goal of reuniting with his father, something that he wants to witness no matter what. On the other hand, Gran laughs at Io and Rackham because their fights remind him of a day when he and Byrne got lost in a cave. However, the story will have to wait for another day and another season, as it is interrupted by a strong earthquake that makes him believe that, perhaps, someone is fighting very close to them. Then, completely forgetting about the main objective, he rushes to find the scene and arrives just in time to prevent Karpa from being killed by a giant monster. Then, Rakan joins the fight to help Marie, but the protagonist, noticing that the enemy has a body of sand that regenerates after each attack, asks Io to use water magic to block his sight. And thanks to this, he manages to hit one of Marie's bombs into the monster's mouth, which obviously turns it into dust. After a few seconds, Lyria along with the rest of the group land on the large edge of sand, therefore, all together they watch how the adventurous girls open the doors to a room full of gold. But the very idiotic protagonist ends up ruining the moment, since when he takes a sword that caught his attention, the ruins disappear, making them return to the entrance, and the gold turns into sand. At night, the group meets with Cairo, who informs them that due to the disappearance of the ruins, the client does not want to pay for the work. Therefore, he asks you to please accept the sword and supplies as a reward. The next day, Lyria finds herself having a bloody dream in which she and the entire group, but ends up being woken up by the protagonist, who, in addition to reassuring her, informs her that she is very close to August Island. Once on the deck of the ship, the boys are surprised to see so much water. So I think it is necessary to mention that August is one of the largest islands and the only one that has water, which is extremely crazy since all of it is floating. After a while enjoying the views, Reincarnated suggests that they hold on since they are about to land, and without giving them time to do anything, they begin to put the ship into the water. In this way, the group ends up reaching the coast, where they tell her that there are very few people for it to be a tourist area, which attracts Catalina's attention, who suggests that perhaps it is low season. But Lyria brings together all the peace by confessing that she can sense the presence of a primal beast, although she comments that its voice is too faint, as if it were small, and asks the protagonist if he can perceive something, to which Gran answers that, more than a voice, she can smell a tremendous murk smell. For some reason, the group follows said smell until they find a type of slime, but what catches their attention the most is that, in the distance, they can see the smoke of a campfire. Suddenly, a guy approaches them with his boat to ask them to leave the area because they are burning dangerous things, but upon looking closely, he recognizes Rackham. Therefore, he takes off his mask to show her that he is old huge, and gets off the boat asking if he is out for a walk with his family. Catalina, noticing that the man believes she is his wife, is quick to deny everything, while Reincarnated tells her that they are actually a crew commanded by Graham. After a tremendous blunder, Eugen offers to take them to the city, and during the trip he tells them that Auskus is at war against the Erste Empire, a situation that has forced him to become a mercenary. But in order not to bore us so much, I summarize that the reason for the war is because the Empire is contaminating the waters with waste from the shady experiments they carry out. Having said this, Eugene confesses that he is confident that they will win the fight soon, because they have the support of Leviathan, the deity that protects the sea, and even suggests that they pray to him for good luck. Several minutes later, they arrive at Masseria, the capital of the August Islands, a floating city in the purest style of Venice, where, upon disembarking, the first thing they witness is a wounded mercenary, so Io quickly uses her healing magic to help him. Then, Eugene says that they have many men discharged because of the monsters, and that's why he asks him to please take a look at them. Catalina, for her part, offers to teach them combat strategies, which Eugene immediately accepts, but she also abuses trust, since Huracan asks him to take care of the ships, and the protagonist orders him to do the shopping together with Lyria. Thus, both spend hours walking around the city, although things get strange when a group of men stop them with an awkward show just to sell them food. The owner of the store, noticing that they are new in the city, asks his employees not to be so annoying, and as a sign of his kindness, he gives them one of his dishes, on the condition that they return with friends, if they like it. After eating, our boys continue on their way with their errands, but they stop for a moment at the craft store, because Lyria has been amazed by a hair clip. So, obviously, the protagonist, to look like a winner, buys it without hesitation, and then discovers that, according to the islanders, blue amulets serve to strengthen bonds between people. Suddenly, the sky turns dark to make room for rain. Then, they both take refuge under a roof, where Lyria confesses to being very happy with everything they are experiencing, and even begins to talk about her feelings. The protagonist, quite nervous, takes advantage of the fact that the rain has calmed down to go buy the last thing, but the moment he leaves Lydia alone, the people of the Empire take advantage of it. In this way, the Blue Net ends up being taken to the port, where Captain Palmer, his mother's son, blames her for everything that August Island is suffering, and even reminds her that she is just a tool that the Astrals abandoned in order to destroy everything. Lyria obviously denies doing everything the guy says, so Palmer shows her an artifact to jog her memory, making her remember that the first time she saw that thing, it murdered a bunch of innocent people who were just trying to contain it. After that, the guy begins to manipulate her by saying that she is nothing more than a tool of destruction, therefore she should stay away from her friends if she does not want to harm them. Despite being almost convinced, the blue girl insists that her words are nothing more than a farce, which causes Palmer to break the hair clip that the protagonist gave her and orders her to get on the ship. But suddenly, she appears beating all the guards and demanding that they release her friend. The captain, faced with the situation, informs the protagonist that the only thing he did is remind Lyria what it is, when, suddenly, a sea beast emerges from the water to destroy the Empire's battleships. The protagonist, for his part, takes advantage of the situation to push Palmer straight into the water and tries to take Lyria, but noticing that the girl is not moving, he asks his friends, who have just arrived, to take her to a safe place while he fights the sea beast. However, none of that will be possible as the monster causes a tsunami that leaves much of the city underwater. Graham, totally defeated, stares at Lyria thinking about how to rescue her, But to their good luck, the mysterious woman who caused a landslide earlier appears just in time to put them in a safe place, as well as to make the sea beast calm down. Then everyone is taken to the infirmary, where the only one who doesn't wake up is Lyria. Then the mysterious woman introduces herself as Rosetta, Eugene's friend, and tells them that the sea dragon they saw earlier is Leviathan, the great primeval beast that rules the seas. Catalina, for her part, asks if this bug has anything to do with Lyria's situation, to which Rosetta answers no, but that the blue peel for some reason has entered a state of blockage, which can only be reversed with drastic measures, but the woman does not recommend it, since things could get worse. After most are gone, Gunn asks Catalina what the fuck Palmer meant when she said Lyria could destroy everything like that time. Then she, without any other options, tells him that a long time ago during an experiment, Lyria summoned a beast that completely disintegrated the island where the tests were carried out, which caused it to be locked in a place specially prepared to stop its powers, and it was she who was in charge of taking care of it. After learning the truth, they both regret not having been able to protect her, but Catalina, quite angry, insists that everything was due to her carelessness, and suggests that Gran rest a little. However, as expected, the protagonist did not sit idly by and went to talk to Rosetta to ask her to help them wake up Lyria. With the matter decided, the entire group meets on the coast that saw them arrive at the island, where Rosetta informs them that she herself will be in charge of guiding them to the Lumacy archipelago. A few hours later, they arrive at the famous island forgotten by the world and head to the giant tree, where Rosetta summons Yggdrasil, the primal beast that controls the wild forests, who, without saying a word, understands the reason for the visit, and takes them to an area where, using those powers, he gets the protagonist to enter Lyria's mind. In this way, the protagonist ends up in a kind of giant library completely frozen, so he quickly takes charge of looking for his friend, and as soon as he finds her, he asks her to please return to normal. Lyria, for her part, tells him that all the books she sees, apparently, are memories that she has decided to delete, something she does not regret, because the only thing she wants to remember is what she has written in her diary. However, he suggests that he has forgotten the most important thing of all. She is the misfortune of those who have her close. As soon as he comments on this, Gran is teleported for a moment to the memories of that day when the thing on the island happened, and it is then that Lyria takes all the blame. Next, the girl suggests that the misfortunes that have been happening in different destinations are her fault. Therefore, it implies that it has been blocked to protect the group. The protagonist, understanding the situation, tries to convince her that she is not the problem, but it is too late, because Lyria, while expelling her from her memory, lets him know that she has made the decision to give him up for the rest of her life. Graham, totally desperate, throws her the hair ornament that has renewed him and Byrne, and explains that everyone wants to see her again in reality. So, getting carried away by the moment, our boy proposes to build a future together. In this way, both return to normal life, where Catalina is the first to hug Lyria. However, happiness does not last long, since at that moment an Imperial ship commanded by Palmer lands on the island. The group, knowing that the advance of the troops means the doom of the Lumacy archipelago, decides to show up for combat, which causes Palmer to use the artifact to control the beasts of the place. But this is of no use to him, since Rosetta, with her powers, eliminates them all and makes it very clear that she is not going to allow the Empire to ruin the forest. For his part, the protagonist takes advantage of the help of his friends to reach Palmer and destroy the artifact he uses to control the beasts. Then, the guy, without giving up, treacherously tries to shoot with a pistol he had hidden, but Tiama, the goddess of the wind, is present to blow him away, and then returns to Lyria's necklace. Once everything is over, Pele Azul says that, during the attacks on the city, Leviathan confessed that he wanted to help the people of the island, but since his body is very affected by the pollution, he couldn't do much. Ende asks the group to please return to August to lend a hand to the creature that prevented the Empire from capturing it. With this said, our boys begin the return trip, but what catches our attention the most is that Rosetta, who has stayed on the island, observes the ship thinking that she really liked helping the son of the man who invited her on that wonderful trip. Back in the city, the group finds that the Leviathan, completely lost, is destroying everything, so they quickly approach Eugene, who, upon hearing that they want to help him, comments that they can't do anything and that the best thing would be to start with the evacuation. Lyria, at his words, explains that Leviathan is actually tired of so much suffering. Therefore, she assures that she, together with the protagonist, will be in charge of returning him to normal. With this said, Eugene orders his men to protect our boys so they can reach Leviathan, but they are not the only ones helping, as several people with epic abilities join the cause without even knowing what is happening. After a long time fighting, the fish monsters decide to stop the attack and gather around Leviatum, as if they wanted to protect him. But what stands out most to Graham is that the order came from an ordinary monster, and not from the imposing protector of the seas. Bairn, faced with the situation, suggests summoning Bahamut to fry all those monster fish, which Lyria obviously refuses, since the flames would also harm Leviathan. Suddenly, an elf appears in front of them to stop an attack that was going to hit them head-on, and she introduces herself as Charlotte Fenya, captain of the Lomiel Order of Holy Knights. On the other hand, a mysterious blonde girl who has been watching everything from the side thinks things are getting out of control, and jumps into combat, completely ignoring orders to just look at what she had. Eugene, seeing this, takes advantage of the situation to eliminate the fish monster giving the orders. Then, Lyria quickly asks Hydrasil to borrow his power, and with this, he manages to enclose Leviathan between stone spikes, which the protagonist uses to reach the magic stone that controls the protector of the seas. Once freed from the clutches of the Empire, Leviathan gives Lyria some of his power, as well as a fragment of the map of heaven. Suddenly, the Black Knight Apollo orders his puppet to steal part of that power, but Lyria, instead of getting angry, is more interested in knowing how the girl has the same ability as her. However, the Black Knight hints that it is still too early for him to know the truth. At night, while everyone is celebrating for having saved the city, Eugen, a little drunk, approaches our boys to ask them if they have a place for him on the crew, since he has wanted to find someone for a long time but has been putting it off out of fear. The protagonist as captain does not hesitate even a second to accept it, which causes a very excited Eugene to insist that he must drink all the alcohol on the island, but not before making a toast, of course. The next day, despite the hangover, the islanders organize an emotional farewell for our boys, so the protagonist, quite excited, comments that the time has come to discover together what is at the end of the sky. Many hours of travel later, the group lands on a transit island where, as always, Cielo has a bar and restaurant, and in order not to lose the habit, the elf merchant offers them a job. However, this time, instead of accepting straight away, Eugene asks that they first talk about it since, despite being a famous crew, they are bankrupt. After talking for a while, Zero comments that since it is a low-risk mission, he cannot offer them much money. So, as a courtesy, in addition to the corresponding payment, he is going to treat everyone to dinner tonight, which causes both our boys and the other people in the place to start ordering food in droves. At first thing in the morning, the group arrives at a small forgotten island of beast people, where, first of all, they thank him for having agreed to help them, and then they tell them that for 2 months they have been hearing a rather sinister noise. But what draws the protagonist's attention the most is that 2 days ago, a draft girl arrived on the island. Suddenly, the sound that torments the island takes over the environment, and by using his powers, he confirms that it is a new primal beast. With this confirmed, Grant and Catalina analyze the possibility of staying on the island to solve the problem. But, at that moment, the protagonist observes how a young boy who is preparing to go down into a cave tells his friends that he dreams of one day taking to the skies, which obviously makes Grant see himself reflected in the little boy, and for that reason alone he offers to give him a hand with his goal. In this way, the protagonist begins to go down the walls of the cave hoping to find what the little boy wanted to recover. But suddenly, a loud roar makes everything shake, and a light that has just fallen to the bottom reveals a pair of legs. Later, the group returns to the inn with Alliance, the draft girl who, in addition to eating like crazy, thanks them for helping her get out of the cave and tells them that she came to the island only because something seemed to tell her. After talking to the girl for a while, he comments that perhaps she knows something about the sound that torments the island and takes them to the bottom of the cave to show her how the people of the Empire are doing experiments with a primal beast. Suddenly, Captain Palmer appears behind them saying that he has been waiting for them since they arrived on the island, since he really wants to see how the dark beast Tripoka is responsible for punishing them for what happened last time. As soon as he finishes his words, the guy orders the monster to be released, and the faggot leaves the island thinking that, when everyone is dead, he will be able to take Lyria without problems. However, he did not realize that the group has become stronger, and even less so that Elisa has fire powers, which serve to stop the beast, since for some reason the heat blocks her sight. Grant, for his part, takes the opportunity to climb onto the monster's back and break the magic stone that makes him lose control. Then, Lyria quickly uses her ability to calm the beast's lack of control, causing it to hand over its power to her without resistance. Once peace has returned to the island, the group says goodbye to the townspeople and Elisa, who, very excited, demands that the next time they meet in the skies they train together. At night, the group heads to the next destination, so while they travel, Lirio confesses to the protagonist that she really wants to talk to the girl who accompanies the Black Knight, since she can't stop thinking because they have the same power. Graham, understanding the situation, promises that the next time they cross paths, he will do everything possible to make that happen. And before Lyria acts humble by saying that she doesn't deserve it, he assures that it will be like returning the favor, since, if it weren't for her, he couldn't have started the trip to the Astral Islands. The next day, an Empire ship detains Great Cipher, and a spokesperson passes by to inform them that General Furies wants to negotiate peace with the city of Albium. Several hours later, the group is just meters from the city of Albium, so Catalina takes the opportunity to warn the protagonist that they must be prepared for anything, since it is very possible that everything is a trap. However, what the blonde doesn't know is that she is going to get the surprise, and so will you, because I dared to omit something. Grant, for his part, confesses that he is not afraid of what may happen because he is willing to face anything to achieve her and Deliria's release. Eugen, upon hearing this, interrupts to ask the protagonist not to try to carry other people's problems on his shoulders, and even suggests that he enjoy the moment, as if he were sightseeing in Albium. After landing, Garcia, an outstanding student at the military academy, approaches the group to guide them to the castle, but the boy is such a fan of Catalina that he takes advantage of the moment to tell her that he knows the whole story about the epic fight he had against Vera to occupy the position of commander. Our boys, quite surprised, ask Catalina what the hell the guide is talking about. Then she, feigning dementia, confesses to them that she is graduating from the Albium Military Academy. Arriving at the castle, the group is received by Vera Lilly, the commander of the city, and Catalina's sister, who takes them to General Furious's office, where the little man, very suspiciously, signs a contract of freedom for them because he is tired of his men getting hurt every time they try to catch Lyria. Catalina, at his words, asks if the Empire is really going to give up such a powerful resource just for that reason, to which Furies, with complete coldness, answers yes, since it makes no sense to have a weapon that cannot be controlled. Once the negotiation is finished, Vera takes the trouble to make sure the entire group has gala clothes, since, as night falls, a party is held in honor of the freedom achieved to take to the skies. During the event, both Catalina and Vira catch up on things, and they even tell part of the group what their years as classmates were like. But while that happens, Eugene is on the terrace watching General Furious's ship, since it seems very strange to him that the little man has not left the city yet. Later, Gran walks away from the crowd to take a breather when suddenly a strange sound catches her attention, and that's when Lyria appears to tell her that it is a primal beast, the same one she has been feeling since they arrived on the island. Vera, who apparently is watching them, approaches saying that she is Luminiera, the primal beast that protects the screen and its knights. She often says that every few years a tournament is held between knights to determine who is the commander, since the strongest person is the one to become Luminiera's master, which means that before reaching that position, she had to kick the butts of a lot of strong guys. While telling her story, Catalina approaches saying that she has been looking for them everywhere, which causes Vera, for some reason, not to want to talk about it anymore and suggests returning to the party. However, at the moment that Gran and the others walk away, Vera, through tears, confesses something in Catalina's ear. The next morning, Lyria, very desperate, goes to the protagonist's room to show him that Catalina leaves a farewell letter, in which she apologizes for being selfish and not being able to keep the promise of always being by the blue-haired girl's side. The group, upon learning about the matter, become very sad, and wonder how Catalina simply left leaving a letter. Then, Grant, refusing to live with the doubt, comments that the new objective is going to be to find her so that she can tell him things to her face. With this said, our boys decide that it is best to ask Vera for help, but just at that moment, Eugene informs the protagonist that he is going to the Great Cipher, because something has been bothering him since last night, so Raken, knowing well what it is about, offers to accompany him. Upon arriving at the castle, Gran and the others find that the guards do not want to let them into Vera's office. However, since our boys never give up, they make Bayer distract them with lies, and, in this way, they manage to infiltrate. Vera, upon being informed of the situation, gives the order to capture them as soon as possible, since he refuses to let some children ruin the ritual, which causes the group to have to hide in the kitchen, where, by pure chance, he hears how two employees comment that the commander has requested tea for Catalina. Knowing that they are in the right place, Grant and the girls manage to be alone with the army general, who, without any other options, ends up confessing that the signed contract was a trap, since, in exchange for freedom, they had to allow them to use the luminary beast as a weapon, which explains why they talk about a ritual, as well as making it clear that they are quite stupid for having accepted something without reading the conditions. Leaving that aside, Io asks what the hell Catalina has to do with it, with everything that is happening. Then, the guy comments that the blonde has agreed to offer herself as a sacrifice for the good of Albium. Suddenly, a group of soldiers appear to save the general, so Io uses her magic to stop them, and that allows the others to escape. But a few meters later, they run into Catalina, who, obviously, they complain about for the stupid decision she has made. Then she explains to them that she is not only doing it to help them, but also Vera, since years ago, during the final succession fight, she decided not to beat Vera. This forced her sister to assume the rank of commander, something for which she was clearly not prepared, and as a consequence, today Luminera does not respond to her calls. Therefore, she believes that the best option to vindicate her selfishness is to give herself as a sacrifice, which would make her the new commander of Albion. At that moment, Beer appears accompanied by a bunch of soldiers to tell them that her sister has already made a decision. The protagonist, totally in denial, tries to convince her by talking about Lyria, but Catalina comments that the blue-haired girl now has a great group of friends who will always protect her. With this said, the boys are expelled from the castle, and on the street they meet Rosetta, who advises them to leave the island now that they are free. However, Gran comments that he would never accept someone sacrificing themselves just so they can continue traveling. Therefore, he proposes looking for Catalina again to try to convince her once again, and even suggests canceling the peace treaty. On the other hand, Vera prepares some food for her friend when, suddenly, they begin to have memories of how much fun they had together in their student days, to the point that they began to consider themselves sisters. But the memory that hits the hardest is when she heard Catalina complaining about being the possible new commander, since that motivated her to give everything in battle so that her best friend and sister can fulfill her dream of being a hairdresser who helps the weakest, which means that the blonde, in reality, did not allow herself to be won, but was surpassed. Again, in the present, Viral gives Catalina the sandwiches that she loved so much in her youth, but the moment she hears that she would like to share them with others, she leaves the room very angry, thinking that she knew that her new group was going to come between them, which leads her to wonder why the hell General Furies is taking so long to eliminate them. On the other hand, Gran with the girls approaches the dwarf's ship to demand the fine print of the contract, but Fury is surprised to hear about the Luminaria's affair, since apparently everything is a lie from Vera, and he is plotting something else more powerful. Meanwhile, the protagonist informs that, from now on, the contract is void. Therefore, the boys rush to run to the Great Cipher, which was already waiting for them to go directly to the top of the castle. One of the soldiers, faced with the situation, tries to warn about a possible attack, but Furies hits him and, after insulting him, explains that now the most exciting thing of all is coming. Upon arriving at the castle, Grant informs Catherine about the destruction of the contract. However, it is already too late as Vera has started the ritual and supposedly cannot stop, although this is clearly not enough reason for them to give up. Therefore, Lyria puts her hands on the magical barrier that separates them and, while uncontrolling all of Luminera's energy, reminds Catalina of that time when she promised her that they were going to explore the heavens together. In this way, he manages to make the blonde realize that she is making a bad decision, and they even make her interrupt the ritual, which causes Vera, very angry, to demonstrate that, in reality, she can control Luminera's powers. Lyria, noticing Katrina's surprise, tells her that the beast has been obeying Vera all along. Then, the girl confesses that since she left 7 years ago, he has missed her every day. But when he found out that she had become a fugitive, he realized that his sacrifice assuming the position of commander was in vain. While Santa was away, General Furies tries to shoot down the Great Cipher with a cannon shot, but the idiot ends up hitting the castle, which causes Vera, totally angry, to use Luminera's powers to shoot down one of his battleships, and, in a state of uncontrollability, he promises Catalina that he will soon put an end to the plague that seeks to harm her. However, he did not mean it as a good thing since, after eliminating the Empire's ships, he is in charge of attacking both Graham and Lyria in order to be confronted by Catalina, who, very desperate, asks him to please stop, which he obviously does not do, and with a deranged look, assures that he will soon be able to recover those happy days that they lost while he was gone. Suddenly, Eugene, from the big cipher, starts shooting to get Vera's attention, and in the midst of the commotion he manages to throw a smoke bomb, which Gran takes advantage of to take Catalina straight to the ship. As they walk away from the island, the blonde apologizes to the group for leaving without telling them the truth, but also insists that she still has to take responsibility for her mistakes. The boys, at his words, comment that that was all they wanted to hear, and while Raken changes the course of the Great Cipher, they let him know that they are going to give him a hand. Suddenly, Vera appears behind them, ready to exterminate them, forcing Raken to use his best helmsman skills to save everyone's lives. Once at the castle, Gran and Catalina begin to fight against Vera to buy time, since in the Great Cipher, Lyria together with Io are conjuring something that could work. However, I hope that the girls hurry up, because they are both taking a beating, and even the protagonist has already been on the verge of death more than once. After a few minutes, the girls finish their magical prayers to summon Leviathan, who, with the help of Io, manages to neutralize Vera's powers. In this way, Catalina is left in a one-on-one combat with a bare sword against her lifelong friend, who, very angry, asks her why the hell she is allowing herself to be manipulated by a boy who does nothing but keep her away from her dreams, the same dreams for which she sacrificed her life so that she can fulfill them. Catalina, for her part, tries to explain to him that, thanks to her, he was able to understand the reason why a true knight brandishes his sword, but Vera, blinded with anger, begins to throw sword blows at him while asking him to please stay by her side forever. But when our girl refuses, saying that that would be repeating the story of the sacrifice, Vera, completely unhinged, goes straight for Gran, which ends up going like shit, since Catalina quickly intervenes to prevent the protagonist from being the protagonist. Vera, very surprised, asks him through tears why the hell he did that. Then, Catalina comments that this is the duty of a true gentleman, and, while he bleeds out, suggests taking advantage of the time to catch up. Once things have calmed down, Io approaches the scene to heal Catalina's wound. Therefore, Lyria takes advantage of the moment to communicate with Luminera, thus getting the primal beast to give her part of its power, which means that Vera will now be free to go wherever she wants, as long as she returns to the castle, since she is still her teacher. The next day, the group prepares to continue traveling through the skies, so Graham, before boarding his ship, begs Vera to join the adventure. But obviously she refuses, because she still does not know what path she wants to choose for her life. Many hours after leaving, the group encounters in the air the troops of Captain Palmer, the annoying old man who has been trying to eliminate them since Season 1, but he gives up his attacks when he sees that the large cipher changes direction towards Belo de Niebla Island, which is known for swallowing all the crews that enter its airspace. After the emergency landing, Raken reports that to fly again, they will have to wait a few hours, and that, unfortunately, some elements have broken. Therefore, the protagonist offers to go to a nearby town to look for food and information on where the hell they are. Lyria, for her part, confesses that there is something on the island that gives her strange sensations, but she cannot confirm if it is a primal beast, since for some reason her senses are a little clouded. Later, Graham, Lyria, and Io arrive at a somewhat creepy town, where the blue-haired girl gets a tremendous scare when she tries to talk to a couple about what was happening. Although this may be taken as an insult, they cordially invite him to eat something at their house where, laughing, they say that everyone gets scared when they see them, and explain that this is because they are zombies. This surprises our boys, but in the same way, Grant remains calm and asks them how long they have been in that condition, since no one is born a zombie. Then, the man says that, more or less 100 years ago, a strong epidemic devastated the town, but when they thought everyone was going to die, a kind of ghost ship appeared, and since then, no one has been able to die. The lady, for her part, comments that she is very excited to have visitors from abroad, regardless of whether they have been too frequent. These last words leave the group a little confused, so the gentlemen, very kindly, take them to the kitchen to introduce them to the girl who is with the Black Knight. However, the girl is not alone, since at that moment Drang and Sturm also enter the house, but what seemed like it was going to be a fight ends up turning into a meal, because both Lyria and the Black Knight puppet are hungry. Once they have devoured the food, Dan tries to lie to them that they are on the island for vacation, although seeing that not even his partner has believed the lie, they end up confessing that they are in search of treasure. So, taking advantage of the fact that our boys are stranded until further notice, they propose to make a truce and search for said treasure together, since they are going to need help with the primal beast. But, to the surprise of the group, he explains that, in his opinion, the ghost ship that appeared 100 years ago is actually a beast that does not allow ships to leave the island, as well as that appears from time to time to eat the zombies. With this said, Great agrees to be a truce. Therefore, without wasting time, they begin to walk through the forest, where Io, realizing that Lyria really wants to talk to the girl who has the same powers as her, proposes taking advantage of the path to introduce herself, which allows them to discover that the girl's name is Orcus. After walking for a while, they reach a castle, and before entering, Lyria suggests talking to the girl who is watching them, but it turns out that, besides her, only Orcus can see her. The girl in question tries to escape before being discovered. However, it is too late, as Lyria uses her powers so that everyone can see her. The young woman, upon hearing that they want to know her name, confesses that she doesn't have one, and even comments that she doesn't even know who she is. Then, Dan christens her Fairy, but clarifies that it will only be until he can remember her information. Next, Fairy takes them inside the castle, where he tells them that he has been wandering around the island for years. However, since no one could see her, she decided to take advantage of the time to read all the books in the place, which allowed her to discover that a guy obsessed with immortality lived in the castle who lied to the town that he needed living sacrifices of a father and daughter to stop the epidemic, but in reality he used them to invoke Celeste, a primal beast that supposedly brings immortality. After telling them that, Fairy comments that in all these years she could not find the doctor or the sacrificed, which led her to want to look for answers in Celeste, but it turns out that not even the beast can see her. Gran, very excited, immediately offers to help her with her problems, and that is when Lyria notices that a great primal one is approaching the castle. When they leave, seeing what it is about, they meet Celeste, who all at once rushes for Orcus, but also ends up taking Lyria and Io, since they both tried to save her. Although the craziest thing of all is that all three of them wake up in a kind of sunny landscape with many blue flowers. Meanwhile, outside, the protagonist comments that Lyria is still alive, since otherwise he would have had to die. Then, Eugene, who has just arrived, informs that he is going to prepare the ship to go out to look for them. Again, with the girls, we can see how, in the middle of so many flowers, they find a giant door. So, knowing that they couldn't be worse, they open it in the hope that it will be an exit, but they end up being teleported to a kind of very windy desert. In the same way, all three pass through different types of biomes, and even come across more than one door at the same time. However, neither seems to be a way out. Even though it's getting worse and worse, the girls continue to move through Celeste's body, but the most striking thing is that Lyria takes advantage of the situation to socialize more with Orcus. Suddenly, something makes Io fall to the ground. However, the most alarming thing is that the young woman loses her memory completely. A few hours later, the girls arrive at a rather strange place, where a giant face with an announcer's voice explains to them that right now they are in the core of Celeste, the area where everything begins and everything ends, since the primal beast steals the memories of those it swallows and preserves scenes of their life within its being. Io, upon hearing this, realizes that all the biomes they have passed through are places her father took her on adventures to when she was a child. Then, the voice comments that Celeste steals all of that in exchange for eternity. No sooner had he finished speaking than something began to pull Io's body. Despite the girl's attempts to hold her, the little one's soul was devoured. Outside, the protagonist, along with Fairy and the mercenaries, head to the area where the summoning ritual took place 100 years ago. Our guy plans to offer himself as a sacrifice to find his friends. However, things don't go as planned. Simultaneously, the deranged doctor living inside Celeste realizes the girls possess the astral's power. Fully motivated to achieve his goal, he begins controlling the primal beast to devour everyone in his path. Amidst the chaos, he stops to tell Fairy he forgives her for stealing his immortality. Io, having been discarded, tells the guys about controlling Celeste from within, but she apparently doesn't have full control. It seems the beast itself expelled her on purpose to save her life. While Gran plans to enter Celeste, Fairy approaches the village to explain that with the curse's annulment, they might cease to exist. They understand perfectly, even saying all they wish for is to rest with dignity. Knowing this, our guys first stop Celeste with several ropes, which the protagonist uses to cross between the two ships. But I must give much credit to Dram, as during the plan's execution, one rope snapped, and he risked falling into the void just so Gran could cross. Once inside Celeste, the protagonist appears in his house, where, besides hearing his childhood wishes, he encounters a version of himself trying to kill him, claiming he can find the Astral's Island alone. So, the protagonist, despite finding it quite strange, defends himself without hesitation. Before delivering the final blow, he declares he'll reach the Astral's Island with Lyria. Suddenly, Gran's evil version transforms into the face of the guy controlling Celeste, who tells him if he means that girl with extremely strange powers, then he's lost, as she's merely a vessel, and he, the ultimate being, is far more powerful. No sooner had he finished his nonsense than the guy tries to stab the protagonist directly in the chest. But it's only an attempt, as Gran uses Lyria's vital power to defend himself. Then, after dodging the enemy's tentacles at full speed, he cuts him in half. Thus, our guy manages to free both Lyria and Orcus, who immediately combine their powers to completely eliminate the curse tormenting Celeste. Once things calm down, the village zombies are sent to eternal rest, and Fairy recovers her memories. So, she immediately heads to the place where everything happened 100 years ago. Meanwhile, the group bids farewell to the others to return to their adventure. Then, Dan, while searching for Fairy, confesses he knew who she was all along. She's his grandmother's sister who, before dying, begged him to save her from the curse. A few days' journey later, the group arrives at Galanzo, an island with the best airship engineers. The Grand Cipher needs some rather complicated repairs they can't do themselves, but what worries them most is the amount of money needed to pay for the labor. Suddenly, Cyro appears, saying he seems to have arrived just in time as he has a job for them. Then, Catalina suggests signing the repair contract before the price changes. Eugene and Cyro, hearing her words, explain that in that nation, nothing needs to be signed, as for some reason, promises are always kept, no matter how informal. Then, Lyria comments that it seems to be the work of a primal beast, as she's been feeling its energy since they entered the island. Later, after working all day, the protagonist approaches the workshop to see how things are going. So, Reiken takes the opportunity to ask him where they'll go after the repairs. Our guy replies that the goal remains the same, but if he wants to go somewhere specific, he can do so without issue. Hearing this, Reiken denies it, saying the only thing that matters now is finding the Astral's island. But he's lying, as every night he has nightmares that make him wonder what he wants for his future. Meanwhile, Eugene meets with Cairo to deliver the order he sent him to find, though his real interest is to consult about something he asked him to find in August. However, since it seems to be top secret, we'll find out later, or so I hope. The next day, Reiken walks through the city, observing in detail the streets he ran through as a child. Yes, because in the past, he often visited with Eugene, but unfortunately, he can't find the answers that keep him awake. Back at the workshop, Reiken performs the final inspection of the ship. As if things weren't chaotic enough in his head, the moment he starts working, a mysterious boy with feminine features appears, very happy to have found the Grand Cipher. But things get stranger when the guy addresses Reiken as if he's known him forever, even warning him that the ship is in danger. At that moment, our protagonists approach, intending to help finish the final details, when suddenly, Palmer appears with his army and uses dark essence to control the white-haired boy, because the subject is the primal beast of the shipbuilders. Reiken, seeing the boy forced to unleash his power, realizes it's Noah, a young man who, when Reiken was just a child, motivated him to pursue his dream of making the Grand Cipher fly. After destroying the ship, Palmer takes advantage of everyone being unconscious to order his men to take Noah, Lyria, and Gran. With our protagonists off the map, Reiken comments that it will be impossible to catch a small ship with the Grand Cipher, but suggests acting quickly. Io, for her part, comments that the ideal would be to find out where Eugene is, as they'll need his help to find the others. But the moment Catalina warns there's no time to wait, Rosetta approaches, saying she can take his place temporarily. With this said, they meet with Cairo, who uses his merchant privileges to help the group infiltrate the castle, and even confirms the protagonists are there. Meanwhile, Gran and Lyria are taken to the Chancellor of the Erste Empire, who, besides asking Palmer to leave, asks our guys to tell him everything they know about the skies. He first tells them that long ago, the Astrals suddenly appeared in the world and conquered skies that belonged to the Celestials. But that was until they lost control after the War of the Sky Dominion. After bringing them up to speed on history, the Chancellor introduces herself as Fresia von Bismarck and confesses that for her, the story isn't quite like that, which is why she wants to restore the true narrative to the sky. Meanwhile, Reiken informs the guys that he'll take the opportunity to look for Noah, which prompts Rosetta to decide to accompany him, as she also knows the young man. Again, with the protagonists, we see how Fresia explains that if they've been able to advance on their journey, it was thanks to them, as the Empire decided that Lyria conquered the power of the primal beasts in her own way. That's why, now that her energy has reached the point they needed, she, as Chancellor, will use it to correct the history of the skies, eliminating the Astral's conquest and everything they brought to the world. Lyria, hearing this, refuses to correct that history because she likes the world as it is, but Fresia doesn't give a damn and informs them they'll be transferred to the imperial capital, Agastia. Then, both are escorted to the ship assigned to take them. However, halfway there, Catalina and company ambush the enemy troop to free them, which means that they now have to find a way to escape more than a dozen soldiers. Meanwhile, Reiken with Rosetta manage to find Noah, who tells them that the Empire's experiments made people forget about him, but he has been able to stand firm thanks to the promise he made as a child. Rakan, at his words, apologizes for having forgotten. However, he assures that the promise of flying together in the Great Cipher kept him firm all the time, since he was the only one who did not make fun of his dreams. A few hours later, Palmer tries to explain how the hell he lost track of a group of children, but Afresia once again gives him shit and informs everyone that Phase 4 has just begun. For their part, the group watches as Noah tries to give energy to the big cipher, although when they notice that the boy is very weak, they ask him if they can contribute their own. The white-haired man, upon hearing this, comments that the only option is to ask for help from Mithras, the primal beast of promises, which is in charge of making all the promises of the people of the island come true. Therefore, he proposes that everyone promise that they will continue the journey in the Great Cipher, since, in this way, perhaps the beast will contribute its energy to be able to enforce the words. Suddenly, Noah's body begins to be controlled by the people of the Empire, so the young man, with the last of his will, asks Rakan to escape. Immediately afterwards, Noah's body begins to attract all the ships as if it were a magnet, and that is when he offers to activate the proto-reactor, a machine that consumes people's vitality. Rosetta, from below, comments that they are facing the great battleship of the Astrals, a weapon that they once used to invade the Kingdom of Heaven, but she assures that the Empire somehow managed to make it take Noah's body as a heart. The protagonist, refusing to give up, promises Mitra that he will save Noah and the rest of the group. He tries to reinforce his words by promising the same, but Rosetta informs them that, to obtain the beast's blessing, the promise must be with Noah. Rakan, knowing this, does not hesitate for a second to get a small ship to take Graham and Lyria to where Noah is. So, Eugene, who has just arrived, works together with Rosetta to open a small hole in the battleship that allows our guys to enter. Once inside, they fight some unthreatening little machines, and then Rakan approaches Noah to promise that they are going on an adventure together in the Big Cipher. In this way, our boys manage to activate Mithra's power, which makes the Great Cipher emerge from the scrap metal so that everyone, including Noah, can leave the battleship safe and sound. However, the problems do not end here, since the moment our protagonists set foot on land, they run into Apollo, the Black Knight, who, in a friendly but very threatening tone, informs Gran that he is going to take Lyria. As soon as he finishes his words, he orders Orcus to summon a primal beast, and the guy starts fighting the protagonist, so Lyria quickly summons Leviathan, which is of no use, since Orcus summons another much more powerful one, which eliminates him in a second. La Pele Azul, seeing that they have no chance of winning, confesses that she only wants to be friends with Orcus, but the girl, her mother's daughter, comments that it is enough for her to just have Polo, so the protagonist quickly uses his last strength to hug her and throw himself into the void. In this way, they both end up in a sewer where Lyria bursts into tears for not being able to make friends with the other blue-haired girl, which causes Graham to have to console her. Suddenly, Orky approaches asking them to surrender to Apollo's orders. But before continuing, we go back a few years in time to see how Apollo, in reality, is a woman who only seeks to take care of her, because for some reason she one day lost all her memories, and since then she has not been separated from the Black Knight. Again, in the present, Gran asks the girl if Apollo is keeping her prisoner, to which Orky replies that he is not, and that she only decided to save him. Having said this, Orky uses his powers to explode everything, but the protagonist obviously does not give up and tries to fight the Black Knight, which does not help him much, since Apollo reduces him without even making an effort. Lyria, at the Knight's insistence that they surrender, answers that they would never make Graham's efforts in vain, and begins to prepare her powers, so the protagonist, upon noticing that Apollo is about to swing his sword at her to stop her, rushes to remove his helmet with a blow. At that moment, Eugene arrives at the place firing shots and addresses the Black Knight as Apollonia to tell him that he has finally been able to find her, which causes the girl to run away very angry. In this way, the protagonists manage to meet with the rest of the group at the Great Cipher, and while they are scolded for having gone into battle alone, Aaron comments to Rosetta that Grant has the same eyes as his father. On the other hand, Frisia, despite not having been able to get her way, comments that she has been able to meet all the objectives proposed for La Isla. However, in his head, he can't stop thinking about how Graham, being the son of the primal Cessid, has also been able to raise Lyria. A few days later, the group prepares to set off to their new destination, but are interrupted by Lesia of the 4th Executor Crew Fleet, who informs them that yesterday, Apollonia Bar, the former Supreme Counselor of the Empire, was arrested for treason against the Erste Empire, and they want the crew to report to the island of Amatea to testify as witnesses.